Welcome to the First Universalist Church of Rochester, where we are called to nurture the spirit and serve the community. Whoever you are, we welcome you. Wherever you come from, we welcome you. Whomever you love, we welcome you. Important or obscure, we welcome you. We welcome all of you. It is good to be together this morning. If you are here for the first time this morning, we especially welcome you. At the top of our online service, we want to invite you to please remain muted throughout the service. When too many voices sing or speak together, it can create a cacophony of voices on our audio, which can disturb the flow and the experience of our worship service together. As we gather this morning, we want to invite you to pop into the chat and offer a greeting. You can find this at the top or bottom of the screen with an icon of a text bubble and the word chat. So please pop over, offer a greeting. It could be a wave, a hello, or an I'm here if you prefer. Welcome to worship at First Universalist. I invite everyone now to join us in our opening hymn, number 1 from the hymnal, May Nothing Evil Cross This Door.
Anyone with experience in a 12-step recovery program will be familiar with the concept of powerlessness. In Al-Anon, for example, we are taught that we didn't cause our loved ones drinking, we can't cure it, and we can't even control it. At first, this is really depressing. But after a while, we discover it's also liberating. If I didn't cause the drinking, then it's not my fault. It's not about me. And if I can't control, much less cure it, then it's not my job to try. I can focus on my own stuff instead. A lot of life is like this. Most things aren't about me and aren't my responsibility. How wonderful. All I really have to worry about is my own little slice of the world. And what's more, when I try to take care of even that, I am bound to mess it up sometimes because I'm only human, and that's okay. I have permission to be human, and so does everyone else. When I accept this fact for myself and for everyone else, we can all begin to play our parts in building the beloved community. Come, Let us worship together. The candle in the chalice beside me really isn't very impressive. A small lump of wax with a bit of cotton wick left over from some previous celebration, and much like every other candle in the world. Its flame is also a pretty small affair, barely enough to burn my fingers or to see on your screen over Zoom. But as we light this chalice, thousands of other Unitarian Universalists in hundreds of other Zoom meetings are lighting other chalices, reminding themselves, as we remind ourselves, that we are all in this together. Please join me, if you will, in reciting our chalice words in unison. May we be a people of welcome, here to grow in heart and mind and spirit, and may we reach out to serve our community. Please join now in our affirmation of faith, followed by the doxology. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the source and meaning of life. Thus do we covenant with each other and with all. One of the lovely paradoxes of Unitarian Universalism is our call to act with commitment despite a lack of certainty. Ours is an activist faith. It strives to build an ever better world while recognizing that we will never have all the answers. Indeed, that we will sometimes be wrong and will do more harm than good. But this is the only world we have, the only life we know, and we want our church to be a force for good. We bring to it all we can, our time, our passion, our financial resources. And so even as we meet online, we continue the ritual of the offering every Sunday to remind us of our shared commitment. To give online to the First Universalist Church, please copy and paste the link that you will find in the Zoom chat window, or feel free to send a check in the physical mail.
I invite you now into this reverent time of the sharing of joys and sorrows of our gathered community. If you would like to, you can place your hand over your heart to be able to listen from this heart-centered place. As we place stones into the jar, I will read aloud the joys or sorrows of our gathered community, or better yet, we will type them into the chat boxes. And all are invited to share our joys and sorrows in the chat that we may hear from the community gathered here. Wonderful music, great sounds. A good friend, Phil Schaefer, has died. Still stuck in Brazil for the time being, but counting my blessings and hoping not to be furloughed at MCC. I think that gets to. Joy that my garden is doing well. I'm happy to announce that my spinal surgery will be on Tuesday, August 25th at Unity Hospital. I should be released the next day. Happy birthday, Janet Clark Hazlitt. A dear friend was diagnosed with cancer. A joy that I spent a wonderful week with dear friends in Vermont. A joy that I will be up to now sequestered with my up to now sequestered grandchildren coming from Massachusetts this week. And as we drop one final stone into the bowl to represent all the joys and sorrows that are left unspoken in the silent sanctuaries of our hearts, may we honor them and keep them holy. May all be held in the heart of love. I invite you now to join with me in a spirit of prayer and meditation. A blessing for risk takers and failures. Today we share in a blessing for losers, risk takers, all failures far and wide. Blessed are they who fall in the mud, who jump with gusto and rip the pants, who skin the elbows and bruise the ego, for they shall know the sweetness of risk. Blessed are they who make giant mistakes, whose intentions are good, but impact is injured, who know the hot sense of regret and ask for mercy, for their hearts will know the gift of forgiveness. Blessed are they who have seen a D or an F or a C or any letter less than perfect, who are painfully familiar with the red pen marks and labels of less than, for they know the wisdom of the imperfect. Blessed are they who try again, who dust off, who wash up, who extend the wish for peace, who return to sites of failure, who are dogged in their pursuit, for they will discover the secret to dreams. Blessed are they who refuse to listen to naysayers, for their hearts will be houses of hope. Blessed are they who see beyond the surface of one another, for they will be able to delight in the gift of compassion. Blessed are they who stop running the race to help a fellow traveler, who pick up the fallen, who stop for injured life, for they shall know the kindness of strangers. Blessed are they who wildly, boldly abandon winning, for they shall know the path of justice. Amen. I invite you now to join together as we sing hymn number 123, Spirit of Life. Humility by A. Lamar. Humility is a thorned crown. It breaks you down. It confounds arrogance, and it runs it into the ground. Humility is a perspective changer. It changes you through and through. Whether you like it or not, when it hits you, humility brings about a new you. Humility keeps you from being so flippant with your judgments and false security. Humility assures you there are no sureties. Humility is the opposite of invincibility. It's subtle in its tranquility. It teaches you when to fight a battle and where to put your energy. As I have shared before, for a while, I was the union president at school. I enjoyed it in many ways. Helping my coworkers solve problems, being involved in the social justice work that unions do, and playing a role in helping to shape policies. I enjoyed all that. I was released from teaching part of the time to attend conferences and meetings. I had to travel to New York City periodically. I had opportunities to meet with and lobby legislators, including both of our US senators. And I even got to hear Hillary Clinton speak in person. And all of it was interesting and rewarding. But there was something else that I enjoyed too, something that is a little hard to admit. I enjoyed being important. In many ways, it was the most important I ever was. I wielded some real power. Administration needed to consult me at least once a week to seek my input and my okay on things that were truly consequential. The dates for Christmas and Easter break could not be confirmed without my agreement. The Teacher Center could not receive its funding each year without my signature. And no teacher in any school building in 4 counties could be subjected to disciplinary action without consultation from me and my own input. Most importantly, I was responsible for leading the important process of negotiating a labor contract for 350 school professionals, and the agreement wasn't final until I put my signature on the document. I am human. I liked this prominent role. It felt good, always being in the know about important things like budgets and policy changes and possible layoffs, knowing who was in trouble and what they did, gave me a sense of being someone truly important, and being consulted to help solve that problem made me feel even more important. Being able to intervene and often reduce the penalties that my coworkers faced when they were written up was truly rewarding. And the gratitude that I received for these interventions felt wonderful as well. There was a downside to the role too, though. It took an enormous amount of time. There were weeks when I got home at 8 or 9 o'clock, 3 out of 5 days, and this was when I had started my day at 7 in the morning. And because our BOCES serves 4 counties, I spent hours and hours driving on country roads, often in bad weather, to try to get to these different outlying school districts. My time with my students suffered too, as I was always being called from my classroom to take a phone call or attend an emergency meeting or answer somebody's question. And while I was certainly shown a measure of gratitude and appreciation by many members, I also took a fair share of abuse from disgruntled coworkers who felt that their raises weren't high enough, or they had paid too much for their health insurance, or I hadn't done enough for them in a disciplinary hearing. And as for them needing my okay for the dates of Christmas and Easter break, well, every single year when that calendar came out, I received multiple complaints from people whose travel plans did not exactly align with the dates that I had approved. Being a conscientious person, I spent a fair amount of time worrying about the impact I was having. Was I really doing enough for people? Was I getting my coworkers everything they deserved? Was I tough enough with administration? Or did I compromise with them too often and too much, as some of my vocal critics said that I did? I also worried a lot about the money. As the chief officer of this organization, I was responsible for a large amount of public money. At that time, the law dictated that all public employees pay union dues, whether they want to or not. So naturally, a lot of people griped about this, and a lot of people were watching every single penny and how it was spent, and waiting to see if there was any kind of a mess up. I was regularly warned by the state organization, NICET, how important my stewardship of this money was and how I could literally go to jail if something went wrong. Once a year at our president's meeting, they would put up this map of New York State and it would have a star on it for every place that the president had been in trouble for mismanaging funds. So it really made me nervous. As time went on, this role wore on me. The long hours, the complaints of the disgruntled, the worry over the money, and the fear that someday I would be one of those stars on the map of New York State began to have an effect on my quality of life. I had trouble sleeping. I was preoccupied a lot of the time, and I just wasn't present with my loved ones when I needed to be. And I had to give up lots of activities and lots of gatherings that fed my soul. But as happens to important people, the longer I served in this role, the more vital and necessary and indispensable it seemed that I was, to myself at least. For the last year or so, I kept at the job, mainly because there was nobody waiting in the wings to replace me, and there was no one who knew what I knew. I had prepared for this job for many years as the vice president. I was shadowing my predecessor, who happened to be in the classroom right next door to me. So I had ample opportunity to learn what she did. And I did. I followed a lot. The vice president that was serving with me was located 2 counties away and had many more demands on her time than I did, as she was busy raising teenagers. So no one, it seemed, knew what I knew or could do what I did or was able and willing and ready to replace me. I was simply too important to step down. And then, through a series of unforeseen circumstances, as life so often gives us, another faction within our union made it clear that they wanted a turn to lead. And so I chose not to run for re-election. My days of being important were coming to an end. The new leaders, by the way, made it very clear that they believed that they could do the job just fine without any help or guidance or advice from me. And so when I handed over the gavel, I stepped away, not at all sure that these new people were up to the job, but hopeful that they would figure it out as they went. Hopeful that they would figure it out, and I think that they probably did. Now, this has never happened to me before, but the pages are out of are stuck together, and I need just a second here, and I do apologize. I was convinced that no one knew what I knew. And but they did figure it out. They definitely did figure it out. And I'm sure that you already know this. I'm sure that you can tell. Without my even having to go into this, or without having to even think about it, they did figure it out. They figured it out completely, and they figured it out with no help from me. They figured it out just fine, in fact. The dates for Christmas and Easter break continued to be approved. The Teacher Center continued to get its funding, and my colleagues continued to be well represented in disciplinary hearings. It turned out that I was nowhere near as important as I had come to believe I was. No one of us is. The world is not set up that way. But because we all live our lives in the solitude of our own minds, we can come to believe that we are truly important and vital and necessary in ways that are detrimental to our peace of mind, and in ways that can harm others and even the planet we live on. Most of us have been far too important for far too long. Is it even important to be important? Surprisingly, more and more, I think that it is not. In fact, depending on who we are, perhaps we have been important enough for long enough. So much of our life energy is devoted to nurturing the idea that we are unique and special. And this is true. And it is definitely true in some senses. But it is perhaps truer still that none of us is as special or as important as we think we are, and that none of us is really important in the grand scheme of things. And the past few months have really brought this reality into a sharper focus. For a culture of special, unique individuals who have been inculcated in the belief that the response to every single challenge is to do something and do it best, it is felt counterintuitive to absorb the fact that the best way to address this national crisis that we're having with our health right now is to stay home and follow directions. And yet, that is precisely what is needed. And for those of us who have lived our lives in the special uniqueness of white privilege, it may be hard to understand that our voices have already been heard and our gifts have already been showcased and appreciated. And it is time for us to step back and play supporting roles to people of color and to allow them to speak their truths, share their gifts, and lead the movement for true racial justice. If you really think about it, there are so many ways that we actually harm the world with our need to be important. Those of us in the Western world have definitely been too important for far too long when it comes to our use of the Earth's resources. Perhaps it is time that we were a little less important and learned to tolerate being a little colder in the winter, a little hotter in the summer, and a little less well-fed. Perhaps those of us who have traveled abroad a lot of times, perhaps we've traveled enough. Do we really need to see every single country in Europe? Perhaps we don't need a remodeled kitchen or a brand new car. If we learn to be a little less important in our personal lives, maybe we won't have to say every single thing that comes to our minds. And in so doing, we might hear more of what other people have to say. We might hold our tongues when we are angry more, or we might often opt for being loved instead of right. If we are a little less important, perhaps we can refrain from pushing to see the dentist today when we aren't really in pain, but we're just inconvenienced, and we could leave that time open for someone who really needs it. Or maybe we don't have to be the first one in line for an event, or the speediest person on 490. A natural outgrowth of our being less important is that others become more important, and that really is what spiritual growth is all about. Being too important for too long can harm us and the world in many ways. It gives us permission to stand apart from and look away. It's a claim of privilege. It's a lack of compassion. It's a way of disengaging from the real work of the world. It leads to insensitivity. It is what fuels overconsumption. It feeds racism, classism, and all of the other isms. It is isolationist. It is anti-immigrant. It is a way of holding oneself apart. It's an excuse for materialism. It's a way of putting distance between ourselves and the real world. And when all is said and done, it is an illusion. Not only can being too important harm others, but it also robs our own souls of peace and joy to believe that we are more important and more indispensable than we really are. And it can lead us astray in the most important ways at the most crucial times. Any one of those evenings that I gave up for union business when my heart wanted to be home with my partner could have in fact been the last night of one of our lives. Would setting the dates for Christmas break seem more important if that had been the case? I guess it is a sign of the times that we live in, but I have noticed how often Facebook is finding its way into my sermons in recent years. But I guess I feel that if I'm comfortable breaking the rule of using the word sermon in a sermon, then I guess it's okay to reference Facebook too. A few months ago, a 20-something friend of mine posted this on his Facebook wall. I am learning that I am not as important as I thought I was. I happened to be online right as he posted it, and it caught my attention. How insightful, I thought. Almost instantly, those someone is typing bubbles appeared beneath the post. Oh, Marty, you are so wrong, I think the first one said. You are important. Please believe that. No sooner did this appear when I heard another chime and someone else posted, you are very, very important and very special. A few seconds later, a young woman wrote, oh, honey, it sounds as if you're down. I'm here if you need to talk. Within 5 minutes, my friend had been affirmed and comforted by at least 10 people, all assuring him that he was, in fact, dead wrong about what he was saying, that he was indeed important, that he was special, that he was talented, that he was handsome, that he was wise, all of which are true, by the way. And a few people took him to task for being down on himself, all saying variations of, you mustn't ever say such things about yourself. But I got a totally different vibe from his post. I do not know this young man super well, but I have spent enough time with him to have a sense that he is a pretty grounded individual, a deep thinker with a spiritual side, and I was fairly certain that I knew what he was really trying to say. So I took a little bit of a risk and I wrote, you are right. You are not as important as you think you are. None of us are. And that's a relief, isn't it? All of the world's religions are based on the insight that we are all but a small part of something much larger and more transcendent than ourselves. Thanks for reminding me of that. I was quite relieved and gratified when, after a few minutes, he typed, yes, that's it. That is exactly what I was trying to say. Thank you. I don't think that anyone posted anything after that, but I am not completely sure. But that post stayed with me, and it really got me thinking. We were in the early pieces of the COVID shutdown at the time, the first stage where we really couldn't go anywhere and the weather was too cold to be outdoors. And this young man is a server in a sit-down restaurant, so he was not working and he had lots of time to think. And as I said, he got me thinking too. Like everyone at that time, and still, I was struggling to find meaning in my new routine. And I was definitely seeing that so many of the roles that I had always played with such great purpose were in fact not quite as essential or as eternal as I had always believed them to be. Like my Facebook friend, I too was discovering anew that I was not as important as I thought I was. And like him, as I reflected upon this insight, I felt a sense of relief and a certain rightness in it. I was not as important as I had always thought I was. I was, in fact, dispensable. The world was perfectly capable of going on without my presence or contribution, just as my teachers' union was totally capable of going on without my approving the dates for Easter and spring break. It was, in many ways, a relief to absorb this reality. There is liberation to be found in understanding that we are not as vital as we think we are. We are, after all, the most mortal of beings. So, to believe ourselves indispensable is a huge, unrealistic burden to carry. Cultivating an awareness of our true sense in the scheme of things is definitely freeing, because we will, of course, cease to be someday. And as much as we all want to be loved, and we all hope to be remembered, I don't think any one of us wants to devastate those we love when we are someday gone. And we all take comfort in the thought that our loved ones will continue to thrive and to find joy in our absence. These past few years, the interdependent web of existence has been giving us ever more dire warnings that we humans are in fact playing far, far too large a part in things. Hotter temperatures, massive fires, melting glaciers, and even this pandemic are all clear messages that human beings have thought ourselves too important for far too long. And at the same time, the message is just as clear from our Earth that in the long run, we are not as important as we think we are. We can't, despite our delusions, continue to take and destroy and pollute and plunder. We are truly on the brink of extinction. We will all have to live smaller, less grandiose, and more purposeful lives if we have any hope at all of passing on a habitable planet to those who are younger than we are. We are not as important as we think we are, and that is good news. It is in this awareness that we find salvation for the planet and transcendence for our souls. We've had a great ride. We've been important beyond any possible justification. We've had more than our share and done more than we dared hope that we could ever do or that we should ever have expected to be able to do. We have been important enough for long enough, and a hurting world needs us all to take a step back now. I invite you now to join with me singing verses 1 and 4 of hymn number 354, We Laugh, We Cry. Did we finish? Okay.
Sorry, we're having problems. I think we may have to move on this week. I'm sorry, Peter.
Worship element is, no worship element is as vital as we think it is. We move on to our closing words. Well, actually first, now see, because I'm off here now, we extinguish the chalice. As we extinguish our chalice flame this morning, let us read together the words printed in the order of service. We extinguish this flame, but we keep its light in our hearts with its message of love and justice, taking it outside these walls to the world we live in until we are together again. Though we cannot be seated next to one another, we are still connected as an imperfect community. As we come to a time to close our service, I want to invite each of you into an embodied practice of holding hands from a distance at the end of our service. If you are joining us by video, please change your view to gallery view rather than to speaker view. Then reach your hands out to the edge of the screen. For folks here by phone, place a hand over your heart and bring to mind someone you especially love from this congregation. And I think even though we never planned them and we never liked them, the glitches that we ended up having today illustrate the point perfectly, that we are not as important and not as consequential as we may think we are. In every person we meet, especially those who cause us discomfort, we find an opportunity to grow, to learn, and to go further along the path of transformation that is our purpose in life. Every single one is our teacher. May the next week bring you many such moments of needing that help as you become the person you want to be, and may you welcome them with joy. And let the people of the church say, Amen. As we come to a time of close in our service, I invite you to follow the benediction with the words, no longer important. Please join us in typing these words into the chat together.
dig of you.